Hello and welcome to Security in Context. I'm Anita Fuentes, and today I am joined by Mehrinaz El Awady, leader of the Gender Justice, Population, and Inclusive Development Cluster at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. And we will be discussing the impact of the Israeli attacks on the socioeconomic conditions in Gaza. Welcome, Mehrinaz. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Anita. Pleasure is all mine.
So, to begin, I would like to ask you if you could provide a brief assessment of the socioeconomic conditions in Gaza before October 7th, and perhaps discuss what were the factors that were shaping the human development status of Palestinians in Gaza.
Okay. And I think it's very good to start with an overview of before 7th of October because the situation was not the best. There was a blockade for air and land blockade for more than 16 years, and this had seriously affected the socioeconomic situation of the people in Gaza, especially the vulnerable groups like women, persons with disability, elderly. And that's mainly because having access to services was very difficult. If somebody, as a real example, if somebody is sick and they want to go outside Gaza to receive medical support, they have to go through a long process of obtaining security clearance, of obtaining like permission to leave Gaza and return back. By the time they get that, sometimes the person have already died or the complications were like had increased and were heightened to be solved. So they had problems with education, with access to any opportunities that other people outside the world would have to. Uh, Poverty was very high. We have estimated that multi-deprivation, which we called multi-dimensional poverty, so multiple deprivation in like housing, in access to education, well-being, was already high. It stood at 45% in Gaza prior to the war. And that was compared to 11% in West Bank, in the West Bank. So 45 compared to 11%, it was 24 all over Palestine. Employment was already high in Gaza. It was like 3.5 times the West Bank unemployment. Women unemployment in Palestine in general was the highest in the Arab region, standing at 37% compared to an average of 22% in the Arab region. So the situation was not the best.
Thank you so much. So, the policy brief, War on Gaza, where everyone is left behind, mentions that Gaza was in a constant state of de development. Could you maybe explain what that means, de development, and also its implications for the people of Gaza?
So Gaza had witnessed rounds of war since the blockade in 2000 and early on, like 16 years ago. And since then, they had series of war in 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, 2021, and now the latest one in 2023, which was completely different than the previous one. Every time there is a deconstruction of Gaza during the war, and then after the war ends or the conflict ends, we start a process of constructing of Gaza, where people like an international organizations, the UN, donors would put money into construction of Gaza and reconstruction of Gaza. This had been a vicious circle of deconstruction and reconstruction. Now, this has to stop because it is not about construction and deconstruction anymore. It is about development. The status quo could not be the same. We could not go back to the to the status that it was before the war. Things have to change. Having a poverty rate or a rate of multiple deprivation standing at 45% is not the ideal situation that was before the war. So really things need to change and take a completely new path.
Right. So, could you share with us some of the main or the most important findings of the policy brief?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'm not going to talk about the number of people who were killed in the war because it's beyond numbers. Yani, People cannot be equated to just numbers, which is increasing by the day and even by the hour. So I'm not going to talk about numbers, but the situation. You have before the war, we had about 11% of the population were like female-headed household. When we estimated that 20 days after the war, okay, this number had only in 20 days became increased by 1,816 in 20 days. Okay? So you will have a lot of female-headed household with no livelihood, with no access to any opportunity, even if the war is to end today. So this is a dire situation that requires that we look at. We're expecting that at least the GDP would decrease in 2023. Our calculation says that it will be between 4 and 12%. And in 2024, this is going to be between 4 and 9%. This is a great loss to the economy. Until now, about 390,000 jobs have been lost. And this is also an underestimation of the current situation. And we're expecting that this is going to grow in the coming days. We're expecting that 50,000 women, are pregnant in Gaza at the moment. Those are going to deliver with very minimal or no health care at all. Mortality rate is increasing by the hour again. Persons with disability, the number is increasing. It's even tripling than the conflict that happened before. All this would require serious attention because the situation is catastrophic, especially under the pressure that the health system is going through in Gaza.
I'd like to go into the final section of the policy brief, which is titled Towards a Decent and Peaceful Future. And this section argues, among other things, that there should be no return to the status quo, which you mentioned before, right? So, how might we envision this future, and which actors should be involved in the process of building a decent and peaceful future?
Okay. Our estimate also shows that even if we have ceasefire today, multiple deprivation will go down from 96%, which is the situation like 20 days of starting the war, will go down to 71. 71 is not acceptable. Okay? So that's why we're saying going back to the status quo is not even an option. We need to start by having immediate and complete ceasefire. We need to go into sustained humanitarian aid and work on having and building a nexus between humanitarian sustained development and sustained peace. There has to be sustained peace in Palestine. Women have women have to play a very active role in bringing peace to the table. We have experiences from all over the world when women were part of the negotiation and were part of the peace processes. They were more sustained. So this is what we are hoping for and we're looking to.
Well, are there any concluding remarks that you'd like to share with us, or is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to mention before we wrap up the interview?
I think you've covered all the questions. Thank you so much for that and for giving this topic attention.
Of course. Well, Mehrinaz El Awady, thank you so much for joining me today at Security in Context, and I hope to collaborate soon.
Thank you, Anita.